Macdonald. Warp speed to accessibility. Fast-tracking inclusive testing. Camp. Gold sponsors ANZ, Intopia and Telstra. Silver sponsors Canva and Coles. Supporters Rumour the Design Recruiter.
Thank you very much. It's an honour to be here. Let's go back in time to 1966. This is when a new futuristic television show was created. Does anyone know the name of that show? A science fiction show. That was Star Trek, yes. It followed the adventures of the Starship Enterprise and its crew as they explored strange new worlds. And the episodes blended this sort of science fiction themes with moral themes. So they champion values like equality and diversity and empathy and dignity of all sentient beings. And one of the most iconic concepts of Star Trek was warp speed. So that's a speed where you travel faster than light. So let's talk about two themes today, two episodes to help us travel across the accessibility testing universe, potentially at warp speed. So in the image here, we have a captain confronting a very dangerous crew member who has glowing eyes. So what's happened here in this episode? The spaceship has encountered a mysterious energy barrier and it rocks the ship, and Gary, who is one of the crew, develops these dangerous powers. He becomes godlike and he becomes hostile and violent as well. So the captain really has to take action against Gary and uses an energy weapon to shoot at him, shoots at a giant rock actually and falls on Gary. That's the end of Gary. But I'm not recommending that you shoot people when things are not accessible, but this episode teaches us about responsibility and taking action and leadership. So how do we fast track accessibility testing with those qualities? Who are the villains of the accessibility galaxy? So I have another Canva image here of a rather creepy looking guy with glowing eyes again. But I want you to think about your own personality traits. Do you have any of these villainous characters in you? So for example, the heartless human. Well, none of us are heartless here today, obviously, wholehearted about people and people's needs. But can you truly say you have empathy for a diverse range of needs? So, for example, it's Hidden Disability Week. Do you understand what that is? Are you familiar with neurodiverse needs? Another trait that we need to get rid of is the weekend warrior. So when we're testing, using assistive technology very rarely is not going to be a good thing. And another character is the last-minute lieutenant. Do you wait until release week of development to care about testing accessibility? The grim gatekeeper, I have to say that slowly, grim gatekeeper, is the human firewall. So sometimes we can say, I don't have time for that. So if we remove these traits, we can increase and increment our testing speed. What is our learning directive? I have a picture here of a science fiction captain who's recording in his daily captain's log about his adventures and what he's learnt. So what are our learning missions? I love this motto, another day, another discovery. To be able to learn about accessibility testing, we also need to identify what our learning style is. So those of you familiar with Star Trek, the Captain Kirk was someone that learnt by doing, and he was people-orientated and very social. And his colleague, Mr. Spock, was very reflective, analytical, solitary type of learner. So we need to think about what our styles are. And no matter what our learning style is, we really need to think about effective micro-learning, taking in a little bit of information each working day and whether it's videos, blogs, whatever, however we learn, simulation, social learning, have some time for accessibility engagement time, and therefore we can grow in our knowledge and experience to supplement our testing. So what about assumptions? When we're discovering about using assistive tech for testing, we often make assumptions, we have preconceived ideas. So you're looking at a picture here of a space traveller using a laptop with a keyboard and a screen reader. Well, what assumptions have you made about this person already? You might be assuming what type of software that she's using, or the laptop, what operating system it is. I will own up, I used to think that people with vision impairments only ever use JAWS, and I'm very sorry that I used to think that. But obviously, people use screen readers for a multitude of reasons and use different screen readers. So when we are learning about how people use assistive tech, and we've got to apply that to our testing, we need to discover what the combinations are. So how do people combine assistive technology? For example, head pointer with speech control. And also frequent interaction. So depending on your abilities or disabilities, have you tried different accessibility settings on your devices? There's a good quote I read from Hans Hillen at TPGI, who said, "I wish I spent more time using assistive tech products in my daily interactions." And that's something that really sticks with me. And next, the final point about episode 1 is our leadership directive. So the space captain here is holding a megaphone and a shield. What is the captain's log of accessibility leadership? 4 things I thought of that are really important. Doesn't mean you're a manager, just being a leader. Plot the course early. Advocate for shift left if possible, or shift centre, whatever works. Testing early and often. Another thing that I've always found a great experience is to hold a design briefing regularly. So where designers talk through user impacts, so you're on the same page. And then this is where the shield comes in. Raise the shield. Be prepared to block code merges if they don't meet the requirements. So I remember about a year ago, there was a carousel improvement being developed, and I straight away tested it on mobile with screen reader and touch gestures, and it was completely inaccessible. And when I reported it, that particular project was actually dropped because it was just too difficult to try and make it accessible. So if you're really prepared to block those code merges, that's something where you have to be a leader in. And also reporting, keeping real-time feedback flowing to guiding the testing mission. The next episode is about logic and reason. So what's happening here in the picture? The captain is speaking to a colleague that doesn't look very friendly. In this episode, what happened was there was a transporter malfunction, so the captain was going somewhere and he actually ended up in a parallel universe. So imagine if you went to work tomorrow sorry, not tomorrow because you'll be here, another day, and you go into work and everyone's evil, the evil flip side of what they were. That's what happened to the captain. So the captain appeals to Mr. Spock to consider change because he knows that in this universe they're going towards destruction. So the captain says, "I submit to you that you are illogical to be a willing part of this destructive course." In the end, the captain finds his way back to the good lands, the good universe, and he's hoping that his words prevented destruction there. Strange story, but really what it's about is reason and logic can be so important when we are testing accessibility. In what ways? Well, what is our cognitive directive? Logical thinking. I have a Another Canva image here, which is sort of like Mr. Spock. He's got his hand on his face and he's thinking logically. He's thinking about the WH questions. Have you tried the WH questions? They work best in a collaborative session, but they are so good. So, for example, what? You could say, what barriers does this input form create for older users? Then you're identifying problems. I'll put some example of these in LinkedIn later today. But what does this logical thinking do? It helps us to reduce the time we're randomly exploring, and it's targeting probable pain points and identifying future problems. So now I've got a question for you, the audience. What is the fastest approach for an accessibility testing checklist? So if I could bring up the Slido for this, and should be a QR code there you can use as well. 1305691 is the slido.com number. So what do you think is the fastest approach for an accessibility testing checklist? So a lot of people will say WCAG when they're thinking about an audit. There's no right or wrong answer. I'd just be interested to know in the next 20 seconds or so what people think. Thank you for participating. So we've got some tasks base, it's disability base. And yes, if I just scroll down, I'll show you the other ones as well. Yeah, so compliance, the laws. There should also be, if I can scroll up again. Sorry, it's a very touchy mouse. Yeah, it seems I'll just close the poll now then, because I'll keep moving. Thank you. It seems task-based was a popular choice. So I could go back to the presentation. Thank you. Okay, so what I was thinking is I like a checklist that really highlights human needs. I think focusing on human needs is logical. And why is that? Because this can have a deep impact on the way you test. It's motivating, you're understanding the why, it's intuitive, you're predicting issues, it's less boring, you're very engaged because you're thinking about people and their needs rather than technical rules, and you're going to retain those. If it's mapped to WCAG, you're going to retain what those WCAG sort of success criterion mean. So, for example, a neurodivergent will take things very literally and may not understand idioms. So I map it to a test case, make sure that if there's any slang or idioms that there's some mechanism to explain that, you know, selling like hotcakes, for example. And then it's mapped to WCAG. I feel that this prepares us for a more inclusive, people-centred WCAG 3, because focusing on what human needs is logical. It shifts us from checking boxes to verifying user experiences. Another challenge where we need reason and logic for testing is testing dimensions. So we have so many ways of testing, don't we, with devices and operating systems. And here we have just a sample of ways, different parameters and values that we would use for testing dimensions. When you multiply those numbers together, it should come to 4,096 combinations. So obviously that would not be warp speed testing. That would be infinity testing. And I think that what we want is when we're thinking of our dimensions, we want to reduce them with constraints or conditions. So things like if I have a smartphone, I'm only going to have iOS or Android, for example. So with the various numbers of constraints and conditions, you can reduce that to about 800, but then again, that's just too much. So let's reduce it to 15. How do we do that? One technique is pairwise. So I've just got a couple of rows here of the first 15 that I might have created using pairwise testing tool. So the matrix, for example, the first row is I'm going to test a desktop, the website version on Windows, screen reader, landscape mode, light, colour scheme, and a keyboard. So pairwise enables you to have good coverage. And what's the benefit of optimising our testing dimensions? We're catching most interaction bugs and reducing the number of testing dimensions. I'm an automation engineer, so I think this robot is really cute. He is a robot in the image. He's operating a spaceship console. He represents automation. Obviously, we know automation at the moment doesn't catch everything when we're testing, but we can do other things to automate. For example, customised tests. I have some tests that actually do things like dynamic content focus checks and CSS property validations. I write tests that simulate someone navigating with a keyboard and for our particular software, what we expect to happen. I also recommend browser queries are great. If you're using Chrome DevTools, and you can use Query Selector in the console. An example would be you could list all the attributes of a very dense web page of all the alt text, because you want to validate, does that alt text mean something to me? With my human judgment, does that alt text, can I imagine what this particular product or service is? Also, what's going to help fast track your testing as well is if the developers are already using linters and plugins, make sure you work hand in hand with them, that they are also validating accessibility before it comes to you. That saves you a lot of time. So to fast track accessibility testing, we need to be like the space captain in the first episode, be responsible, be a leader, perhaps not carry your energy weapon to work, but identify the inhumane threats in you, have effective learning for quick insights, challenge those assumptions you think about people and how the way they use tech, and exhibit those sort of good leadership qualities. And in the second episode, we know Mr. Spock, well, hopefully most of you know Mr. Spock, love logic. Logic can avert disaster. Asking logical questions to uncover hidden barriers, focusing on people's needs, optimise your test cases, your testing matrix, and do creative things with your automation. You know, AI can write automation for you today, so there's no excuse. So one final word of wisdom from Mr. Spock: live long and prosper, and thank you for listening.
AliCamp, celebrating 10 years.